Hi, Mary Sue William friends. It's Mrs. Caldwell here, and today I'm going to be reading you the information from Ducksters. So, we are doing the Wright brothers. We're learning about the Wright brothers, finding important information about them, and then we're going to be doing a writing assignment on them. So, I'm going to read this biography of the Wright brothers to you today. Wright brothers. Orville and Wilbur Wright are credited with inventing the airplane. They were the first to make a successful human flight with a craft that was powered by an engine and was heavier than air. This was quite a milestone and impacted transportation throughout the world. It took some time to perfect, but in later years, people could travel large distances at much less time. Today, trips that previously would have taken months by boat and train can now be traveled by plane in a few hours. And that's a picture of the Wright brothers. Where did the Wright brothers grow up? Wilbur was the older brother by about 4 years. He was born in Millville, Indiana. On April 16th, 1867, Orville was born in Dayton, Ohio, and on August 19th, 1871. They grew up in Indiana and Ohio, moving back and forth a few times with their family. They had 5 other siblings, so there were 7 kids in all. The boys grew up loving to invent things. They got interested in flying when their dad gave them a toy helicopter, then flew with the help of rubber bands. They experimented with making their own helicopters, and Orville liked to build kites. And so here is one of their first airplanes. Called a glider. Who flew the first flight? Orville made the famous first flight. The flight took place at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina on December 17, 1903. They chose Kitty Hawk because it had a hill, good breezes, and was sandy, which would help soften the landings in case of a crash. The first flight lasted 12 seconds, and they flew for 120 feet. Each brother made additional flights that day that were slightly longer. So the first flight was 12 seconds. They flew for 120 feet. It was on December 17th, and they did a few other flights that day too. And remember, Kitty Hawk is in North Carolina, which is such a cool thing. This wasn't as a simple or easy task they had completed. They had worked hard and experimented for years with gliders, perfecting the wing design and controls. Then they had to learn how to make efficient propellers and lightweight engines for the power flight. There was a lot of technology now how and encouraged involved in making that first flight. So they had to do a lot of work for this first flight to start, or to happen, I should say. Oh. The Wright brothers didn't stop with this first flight. They continued to perfect their craft. Around a year later, in November 1904, Wilbur took their newly designed airplane, the Flyer 2, to the air for the first flight lasting over 5 minutes, which was a big deal because they went from 12 seconds to 5 minutes of flight. Did the Wright brothers invent anything else? The Wright brothers were primarily pioneers in the area of flight. They did a lot of work on aerodynamics, propellers, and wing design, which has to do with all about airplanes. Prior to working on flight, they ran a printing press business and then later a successful bicycle shop. So before they made their airplanes, they had a printing press business, which was like a newspaper type deal. And then later they had a bicycle shop, and then they flew their airplanes. So, some fun facts about the Wright brothers. For safety concerns, the brothers' father asked them not to fly together. August 19th, Orville Wright's birthday, is also National Aviation Day. They studied how birds flew and used their wings to help design the wings for their gliders and planes. Both North Carolina and Ohio take credit for the Wright brothers because they're from Ohio, but they did their fight in North Carolina. Ohio because Wright brothers lived and did much of their designing while living in Ohio, and North Carolina because that is where their first flight took place. The original Wright brother flight plane from Kitty Hawk can be seen at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. And if you wanted to, you can go into this website and click on this to see the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. All right. So that is it. The rest of this you don't need to worry about. If you wanted to listen to the recording again, you could click here on the page, and it is somebody on Duckster reading it. But this is the Wright brothers on Duckster.